who are coming, you will live carelessly and self-centered, and you will mismanage the doors that God gives you. Preach, man of God.
Good evening, everybody. What an amazing time we're going to have tonight. I'm so excited because we're here for another episode of our Let's Talk program. Listen, do me a favor wherever you are right now. Go ahead and share, get the word out. We're excited. Dr. Mia Wilson is with us tonight, and she's hitting on a great subject. And as you know, we've been talking about throughout the month, this being Men's Health Month. And so we talked about some statistics you've seen on our platform about Men's Health Month. And I'm so excited because Dr. Wilson is coming to us tonight, and she's going to talk to us about men and mental health. So right before she goes on, I see you starting to get on. I see you starting to get online. Go ahead and share. That's right. I see the numbers going. Continue to share. Continue to get the word out. I'm excited. Listen, do me a favor. Go ahead and tag some men. Let them know that tonight is going to be an amazing, powerful time. So without further ado, I'm going to bring the guru herself, someone who has been helping us now since the pandemic, make sure that we are better, not just spiritually, but mentally. And so I'm so grateful. I thank God for the life, for the ministry, for the gift, for the professional advice, teaching, prudence of Dr. Mia Wilson. So without further ado, Dr. Wilson, how are you doing today?
I'm well, Ray. Thank you for the invite.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm excited about tonight.
I'm going to get out the way because I'm so excited about what's happening tonight. Dr. Wilson, it is on you.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. For those who don't know who I am, I'm Dr. Mia Wilson. I'm a licensed mental health counselor. I have been in the counseling field for, oh my goodness, close to 25 years. And I'm really excited about tonight's topic. This is June Men's Health Month. And so for my kings, for my men, I am bringing men and mental health. This is all about how men experience mental health, some tips for you, some resources for you. It's important. Mental health is part of your health. And so we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen. I think I have got this down to a So we're going to take a look at men and mental health. Yes, I did play on words. And so this is really important because this is a topic that we're starting to talk about, not a lot. And hopefully, I hope you guys get something out of it and learn something. So the purpose of this presentation is to focus on what men say about mental health, how men are experiencing mental health, warning signs and thoughts that prevent men from seeking help. And I'll also take a look at some well-known men who are now speaking up and out about their own mental health. Men that you probably like, oh, I didn't know, or I know that person, I've seen that person on movies plenty of time, didn't realize it. So the first thing is to look at the overview. For anyone living with mental health problems, talking about it with anyone can be difficult. For men in particular, because sometimes all their life, they're told to man up and be strong, even as little boys. Don't cry, stop acting like a girl. So assessing mental health resources can seem to go against culture expectations. And culture meaning just right across the line for racial, but just the men culture in itself. Social norms around gender teaches young men that they should be emotionally strong and avoid showing any vulnerability. So showing any emotions, that seems they are talked about as being weak if you're showing emotions. So therefore, men tend to downplay their mental health systems, and they don't acknowledge what they're going through. And a lot of them are reluctant to seek help. But that I'm fine can only get someone so far. So especially since men are significantly more at risk for attempting suicide than women, Just because it's difficult to open up about mental health doesn't mean that anyone should struggle in silence. And this is including my men out there that are suffering in silence because they feel that it is a weakness or it's against your faith to go and seek help, which is not. You can still have faith and seek help. We go see our doctors all the time, right? And our dentists. So, why is it important to talk about men's mental health? For several reasons. According to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, in 2020, men are dying by suicide 3.88, almost 4 times more than women. And the fastest growing suicide group is young boys or young men age 5 to 11. Yes, age 5 to 11 is the fastest growing group of a group across the board that is committing suicide. Mental Health America reports 6 million men are affected by depression in the United States every single year. The National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism trusted source put the annual number of men dying due to alcohol-related causes at 62,000 compared to 26,000 women. And this is just alcohol by itself. And this is not even including other drugs. And men are also 2 to 3 times more likely to misuse drugs than women. And depression and suicide are ranked the leading cause of death amongst men, and yet they're still far less likely, tongue twister, to seek mental health treatment than women. So let's mention toxic masculinity. This is a topic that has been coming up in the last 2-3 years. And so, we want to talk about the tough guy syndrome. So let's introduce Jack and Hank. Now, Jack and Hank are best friends, and both of them are the members of the BMW Club, or Black Man Walking. Every Saturday morning, they meet as part of this informal group, and they not only walk, they talk. They talk a lot, almost nonstop. But what do they talk about? Well, Hank is going through some serious marital problems, and Jack is feeling the stress of paying for 2 college tuitions, a mortgage, a car loan, entertainment, and more. But none of this comes up. Also, neither has said so, but they both have high blood pressure and are borderline diabetics. And one of them suffers from symptoms of depression and anxiety. How could they not know all of this about each other? When one asks the other, "Hey, what's going on?" the other always responds, "Great, fantastic," or "I'm good." And then they move on to their favorite topics: sports, cars, TV, work, more sports, larger TVs, and other what we call safe subjects. Jack and Hank do not talk about what's really going on with them. Rarely do they talk about their health, and they practically never talk about feelings or about sources of their insecurities. Jack and Hank suffers from what we call the tough guy syndrome. We don't want to talk about those feelings. We don't want to talk about what's really going on with us. And I guarantee most barbershops in America, if you walk in there, that's pretty much the topics. We're going to add politics to it, but that's pretty much the safe topics that men tend to talk about. The average trait for someone who is masculine is assertive, powerful, and in control and courageous. Almost sounds like the definition of Superman, correct? So with that definition, toxic masculinity is the concept of masculinity being amplified. You got to be really assertive. You got to be really powerful. You got to always be in control. You got to show that you're courageous. You cannot show that you have fear. So there are rules about how you should dress, behave, present yourself, how you should deal with conflict, express your emotions or not express your emotions. There's a constant pressure always having to act are acting masculine, is a result of society pushing stereotypes on men. Men aren't allowed to act a certain way without their manhood being questioned. And then they create this constant competition between males to determine who's more of a man. Traditionally, boys are taught to act like men. So in many cases, treated like men, which can greatly impact their understanding of themselves and their place in the world. So many men have not been told how to process and talk about their emotional experiences, furthering a sense of isolation, anger, and resentment. So with this create an emotional volatility that can sometimes manifest and seemingly shut down in relationships and friendships. So in relationships, they have a hard time communicating what's going on with them or about their feelings, or even in friendships. And so it makes it very difficult to connect with that other person or with their significant other. So, if we took a survey and find out what men are saying about mental health, this is some of the quotes that just men around Jacksonville, I would say, are what they're saying about mental health. So one of the quotes is, we're not supposed to seek help for our mental illness. We have a problem asking for help, especially from folks who think we are the reason for our own mental illness. We are responsible for our mental health, but we need help and support. My problems are too complicated to fix. Having a mental problem means I'm weak. I don't want people to judge me. People often feel a huge sense of relief after finally letting others know what they're going through. In this society, many of us feels alone. Who can return to? Many men's support groups are needed to help men with the healing process. Dragging up old stuff just sounds miserable. Once you start addressing the stuff, you're never done with it. I wouldn't even know what to say. I always feel better after a pint in or a workout. So I don't know if any of you had the same kind of thoughts or feelings, but these are some of the, I'm not going to say common, but some of the quotes that, just kind of doing a survey about how men feel about mental health. These are some of the quotes that I've heard. So, what's some factors that can lead to men's mental health issues? Unemployment or job insecurity. Definitely, when the start of the pandemic, when there was a lot of companies shutting down, companies slowing down, layoffs, it led to a lot of depression, anxiety because of unsecure. I don't know what my future looks like. So a lot of insecurity about, what's happening. Working in a dangerous job, loss of job opportunities in dying manual industries like factories and mines. Uh, I think it was in West Virginia where a lot of the men, when they shut down the coal mines, there was a lot of unemployment. So a lot of men fell into addiction. Lower wage earnings. So, hey, I lost my job during the pandemic, for example. And then I had to get a job because I have to support my family. And so, but the job that they got, they end up with lower wage earnings. And so that could be depressing. Lower education levels, divorce, separations, or loss of a partner, loss of child custody, childhood trauma and adverse childhood experiences, grief. A lot of times men, the way that they deal with grief or not deal with grief, it can sometimes manifest itself until a lot of problems later on. Disability. Hey, I was very independent, and now all of a sudden I had an accident and now I have to depend my dependent. I have to depend on other people. And substance abuse. I started to drink, and a lot of times I'm drinking a mass, or using as a self-soothing behavior, or I'm using the mask some of my own mental illness, my depression, my anxiety. So we're going to talk about the 6 most common male mental health disorders. Now that we saw some of the causes, number 1 is depression. So again, male depression is one of the biggest mental health issues in men. So the CDC, or the Center of Disease Control, statistics show that 5.5% of young adult males suffer from depression. That's about half the number of women of the same age. But while male depression is diagnosed less often than men, because a lot of times we don't identify it, many young men have depression that's not identified by their doctor because their symptoms is less typical of a major depressive disorder. So a lot of times men will describe maybe the physical aspect of the depression and not necessarily the emotional part. So furthermore, while men are less likely to receive depression diagnosis and also attempt suicide at lower rates of women, they are 3.7 times more likely to die by suicide because they use more deadly methods like firearms. They want to shoot themselves, or now the big thing is hanging themselves. So in addition, since young adults attempt suicide at higher risk than any other age group, young men are at extremely high risk. The other one is anxiety. So anxiety disorders are the most common male mental health disorders. So type of anxiety disorders in men include panic disorders, obsessive compulsive disorders, or OCD, generalized anxiety disorder, social anxiety, phobias. So they may have a fear of heights, fear of success, fear of failure, which contributes to their phobia. So while women are twice as likely to struggle with generalized anxiety disorder and panic disorder, rates of social anxiety and OCD are roughly equal between men and women. So it's easy for me to be on this. I can chat with you, I can text you, but having to go out there and socialize face to face can bring a lot of men and women high anxiety. Also, anxiety in men often lead to a higher likelihood of being diagnosed with a substance use disorder or ADHD. So sometimes they may be diagnosed with ADHD and will actually have anxiety. And then substance use disorder is a common one. So data from the most recent monitoring of the future survey of young adults show that in general, young men are more likely than women to abuse drugs, including marijuana, hallucinogenics, and prescription painkillers. Plus, men are almost 2 times more likely to binge drink than women and have consistently higher rates of alcohol-related deaths and hospitalizations because problematic drinking and other male substance abuse is seen as socially acceptable for young men. So if you think about like in college, mostly if we think about college students, we're going to think about men, going to parties and drinking. And then the women are amongst them somewhere. But that's considered to be masculine. Hey, you're going out there and just getting drunk. I know I was in the Navy for 10 years, and the biggest thing with the male sailors is that when you go out on liberty, it was highly acceptable that you got drunk. Now, if you had to be carried back to the ship, oh my gosh, that was even better. So that was considered masculine. And it's less likely, frequently, to be recognized as a symptom of a male mental health condition. Post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, is another one of the most common mental health issues in men. Moreover, PTSD is not just something military veterans suffer from. Approximately 60% of men experience at least one trauma in their life, typically related to either accidents, physical assaults, combat, or witnessing death or injury. So some people, if I grew up in a very violent neighborhood and I witnessed this, they can be traumatized, and they can hold that trauma for many years to come. According to the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration, more than two-thirds of adolescents have experienced a traumatic event, and those experiences can have a long-term effect on young adult mental health. Because sometimes young men, or even in their childhood, have maybe experienced physical abuse, emotional abuse, mental abuse, even sexual abuse, and which creates PTSD. So, in the weeks, months, or even years following experiences of trauma, young men can experience PTSD symptoms that can interfere in their daily life and functioning. You were like, wow, he is very angry. He seems to be very standoffish and avoid certain things. And while PTSD diagnoses are again more common in women than men, experts suspect that this may be also because men are conditioned to suffer it in silence or to disregard the physical or behavior issues that might be symptoms of PTSD. And a lot of times people would just say they're very angry or they can't control their anger or they have insomnia, or they are very anxious. So, or another common, male mental health disorder. Bipolar, or formerly known as manic depression, is characterized as extreme ups and downs in mood. Now, this is not just a mood swing, like they have a mood swing. It's a lot more to that than that. But these are extreme ups and downs in mood and activity levels. Bipolar disorder symptoms in male typically manifest between the ages of 15 and 24 and affects about 2.6% of the US population. So while bipolar in young men isn't as common as other male mental health conditions, most bipolar disorder cases, 83%, are classified as severe. So in other words, their symptoms of bipolar is severe enough where they end up being hospitalized more times than not. As with other common mental health disorders, bipolar disorder is underdiagnosed in young men. So many of the symptoms of bipolar and men could be written off as normal young male behavior. So, so sometimes when men are manic, they like maybe they do these high risk behaviors. So they might be racing their cars or bungee jumping, and so they were, oh, that's just them they have adrenaline junkies. Sometimes, and sometimes they are, but sometimes it's only when they're manic that they'll see that they're very energetic and they're doing all this high risk stuff. And so they're like, oh, they just men being men. And the last one is eating disorders. Shocked and surprised. Despite the stereotype that eating disorders only occur in women, about 1 in 3 people struggling with an eating disorder is males, and it's on the rise. So, eating disorder behaviors, this is including binge eating, purging, laxative abuse, and fasting for weight loss, are nearly as common among men as they are among women. Research has found that masculine body ideas are influencing men's behavior toward diet and exercise in distinctly very some different ways than women. And so they have two ways that they kind of form their eating disorder. So a recent study found that nearly a third of teen boys in the United States report they want to gain weight. So they like, you know, things that they figures that they see on social media or in the media or in on television or in the movies, where these guys are very bulked up and they got all these nice muscles. So a quarter of young men are report taking supplements, steroids, or eating more to bulk up because they want to have that type of body. Anorexia, on the other hand, on the other room, is now diagnosed in boys as young as 8 years old, and a full 40% of those with binge eating disorders are male. So, so on the other end of this, men that are feeling lonely, rejected, they're eating their feelings. And so they will go and just, um, eat a dinner even after they ate dinner. And they'll just keep eating and eating, to eat their feelings. And so there's a some really two different spectrums, a little bit different than women. So a couple of famous men in mental health. Jay-Z. And so Jay-Z, we know as a big entertainer, business owner, um, husband to Beyonce. So one of his quotes is, "The strongest thing a man can do is cry. To expose your feelings, to be vulnerable in front of the world, that's real strength. You feel like you got to be this guarded person. That's not real, it's fake." So Jay-Z suffers from depression, and so he's been um, really good advocate about seeking treatment, going to therapy. Branson Marshalls, for people who don't know him, he is an NFL football player. And so he's been really, despite the stigma he's been having from his fellow players, he's been really outspoken about his mental health, and helping other football players who are suffering with it as well, to be, to kind of normalize it for them. So he says, "Before this ordeal, I kept asking God to show me my purpose. I'll be the face of BPD, which is borderline personality disorder. I'll make myself vulnerable if it saves someone's lives, because I know what I went through this summer helped save mine." Trevor Noah, if people don't know who he's really a comedian. He's an author, and he is a talk show host at night. And so, one of his quote, and he suffers from depression. He says one of the best things that helps depression is work and socializing with other people and connecting, because when you work, you find purpose. And this is Michael Phelps. For those who don't know him, he is, you see all the gold medals. He's an Olympic swimmer. And so he suffers a lot from depression. He really came out when, uh, right before Simone Biles, but he was really kind of a support for her when she came out about her depression. So he says, "After years and years and years of just shoving every negative, bad feeling down to the point where, I just I didn't feel it anymore." He told Today last year, "It was a long, long, long road, and I just never wanted to deal with it. And for me, that sent me down a spiral staircase real quick. And like I said, I found myself in a spot where I just didn't want to be alive anymore." Donald Glover, for people who don't know him, he's an actor, director, producer. He's like been in Hollywood for quite a few times, even when as a child. And he says, "After I came off tour, I was just super depressed. I mean, I tried to kill myself. I was really F up after that, because I had this girl that I thought I was going to marry, and we broke up. I didn't feel like I knew what I was doing. I wasn't living up to my standards. I was living up to other people's standards. And I just said, I don't see the point." Kevin Love, for those who don't know him, he is an NBA basketball player, and he suffers from depression. He just came out with a book um, about just being okay. It's called Everybody Goes Through Something. That's the name of his book. He suffers also from depression. And his quote is, "I know it from experience. Growing up, you figure out real quickly how a boy is supposed to act. You learn what it takes to be a man. It's like a playbook. Be strong. Don't talk about your feelings. Get through it on your own. So for 29 years of my life, I followed that playbook." And Wayne Brady, for those who know, he's been in movies, televisions, game show hosts. Um, and so he suffered from severe depression for many years, and he's a great advocate for men and mental health. So his quote is difficult for men in general, I think, because of the way that we were raised. We feel any of the negative emotions or that dark cloud settles on you, and you feel like you need to cry out and speak to someone about it. And nope, I'm not going to do that because I'm a man. What kind of man would I sound like if I told someone, hey, I am so sad. I'm cripplingly sad. I can't get out of bed. I just feel empty. Help me. I'll be seen as some sissy. I'll be soft. That's what you're taught. That's how you were programmed. And that's what kills us. Great quote. Dwayne The Rock Johnson, everybody knows him as a wrestler. Um, I don't know how many movies he's been in, television shows. He suffers from depression. And his quote is, I found that with depression, one of the most important things you can realize is that you're not alone. You're not the first to go through it. I wish I had someone at that time who could just pull me aside and say, hey, it's going to be okay. Here's Brad Pitt. He suffered from depression and addiction. And so everybody knows him as uh, an actor. And so his quote is, I used to deal with depression, but I don't now, not this decade, maybe last decade. But that's also figuring out who you are. I see it as a great education, as one of the seasons or a semester. This semester, I was majoring in depression. Reynolds. So a lot of people notice him in movies. He played in a lot of movies, played a lot of superheroes in movies. And so he suffers from anxiety. And his quote is, I have anxiety. I have always had anxiety, Reynolds said, both in the lighthearted, I'm anxious about this kind of thing. And I've been to the depths of the darker end of the spectrum, which is not fun. Yeah, and he also suffers from OCD as well. Now, Owen Wilson, people know him as an actor. He's played in a lot of movies, and he actually, 2007, attempted suicide. And so his quote is, "As a kid, there's a lot of things that you think about death that kind of landed with me when I was about 11. I don't remember ever talking with my parents about it, although I do remember one time saying to my dad, and I remember exactly where in the house saying, I worry about dying, and seeing my dad turn away and catch himself. But I was surprised to see that reaction. But who knows, maybe that was part of why I said it." So now, Lee Thompson Young. Now, my mom said, well, where's their quotes? Well, they don't have quotes because these are the men that committed suicide. Now, Lee Thompson Young was an actor. He was actually a child actor. He played in a lot of Disney. He played in a Disney sitcom. And then when he became an adult, he played in a sitcom at Rizzoli and Owls. So he was very successful, had an ongoing career, and then he committed suicide. He suffered from depression a lot. We heard of Anthony Bourdain. He was a food critic. He traveled the world, and his death just kind of came as a shock. He had suffered from depression for many years. I think him and Katie Spade, right around that same time, had committed suicide. Don Cornelius. So anybody a big fan of the Soul Train? I watched him for many, many years, but he also had suffered from depression and had committed suicide. Vern Troyer, he was an actor. So if anybody watched the Goldfinger's series, Austin Power series, he played Mini-Me. And he had committed suicide, I believe it was 2019. And then Robin Williams, he was comedian, actor. He had committed suicide. He suffered from bipolar and addiction as well. So, why do men find it so difficult to ask for help? Well, the first hurdle that some men face is that they're so out of touch with their emotions that they don't even realize that's what they are. So that sometimes it's called normative male alexithymia. Literally, it's like without words for emotion. So I have all these emotions, but I can't explain them. Parents and teachers use less emotional words with boys, and they begin to lose their emotional awareness. So sometimes we have done it so much as a society, we don't even realize that we're doing it. So we use a lot more emotional words with girls more so than boys. So as boys grow, they adopt the behavior around them in order to be accepted by their peers and face ridicule and mocking. Excuse me. Social norms. Some men may also worry that society will look down on a man who just can't tough it out on their own, and that seeking or even needing help is not a normal male behavior. So, how do you know if you're simply having a bad day or whether you need to seek help? Well, several things. If you're having a persistent, sad, anxious, or empty feeling or excessive crying, and a lot of times men don't want to cry out in public, and so they will cry in private. But if you're doing this on for most days than not, for more than 2 weeks, you probably start to need to seek help. You're starting to reduce appetite or your weight loss or increase appetite and weight gain. And again, it's not just one thing and it's not just here, but this is more consistent on a consistent basis for 2 weeks and more. Persistent physical symptoms that do not respond to treatment, such as headaches, digestive disorders, and chronic pain. So usually when men go to the doctor, this is what they're describing, and they don't describe the sadness or feeling empty. Irritability and restlessness. They get very angry. Decreased energy, fatigue, feeling like they slow down or like they're running through molasses. Feeling of guilt, worthlessness, helplessness, hopelessness, and pessimism. I feel like the world is like half empty. Sleeping too much or too little, or early morning waking and just pacing back and forth. A couple of more warning signs: loss of interest in pleasure and activities, including sex, difficulty concentrating, remembering, and making decisions. You go to work, it's like, oh, I cannot stay focused on anything. Thoughts of death or suicide attempts. Increased worry or feeling stress. Now, some men, they will feel stress. I mean, it will build up and build up and build up, and then it starts causing health problems. Engaging in high risk activities. Obsessive thinking or compulsive behavior. I got to check on things constantly, or I got to clean things constantly. Thoughts or behavior that interfere with work, family, or social life. People are starting to worry about you. You can't keep up your production at work. You're not socializing like you used to. So should you go to therapy? Well, if you're willing to do the work and invest in yourself, therapy can be hugely rewarding. Yes, I am promoting it. It is a safe, private, judgment-free space that you can share anything with a trained professional who is there to help. And you can also learn more about yourself. Therapy can help you achieve your goals. It can also help you have more fulfilling relationships, and you're more likely to have better health. Remember, your mental health is part of your health. And therapy can lead to improvement in all areas of life. So, here are some daily self-care practices men should at least consider. Starting your day off right. So a lot of times, instead of just getting up and checking your email, checking your phone, checking your social media, sometimes it's like, you know what, let me just get up and just enjoy outside for a minute, or listen to something that's upbeat, or think about all the things that I'm grateful for, big and small, even the tiniest things. You know what, God, I woke up and I had air in my, I'm breathing, just anything, just the small, even the smallest things, and just feeling grateful. Keeping your friends close. You want to make sure that you have good friends, people that you pour into them, and as well as they pour into yourself. And so we want to make sure that we're not holding on to toxic relationships that are not healthy for you, that you pour into them, and that's where the buck stops. Um, and so you want to be able to surround yourself by people who are supportive. You want to be able to set goals and accomplish them. So nothing is more fulfilling than having a goal and actually meeting it. When you look good, you feel good. Making sure that you look good. You when you dressing nice. Make sure you get your beard trim, your hair trim, um, getting your daily grooming. And so, when you look in that mirror, you be like, yo, bro, I see you. I see you. You're looking good. You start to feel good. You start to feel the way you look. Health is wealth. Making sure that you go to the doctor, making sure that you're eating well, making sure that um you're getting your daily exercise, because that is your health. If you are putting more effort into your car, taking your car, making sure you're making sure your car gets washed and looking good, and you're taking it, making sure it gets its oil changes and all of that stuff. If you're doing more for your car than yourself, then that's an issue, because you supposedly last longer than the car. Ask for help and accept it when it's offered. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay when I don't have to have the tough guy syndrome and be able to say, man, I just need an ear. I need somebody to help me. And then think of yourself as your own best friend. Sometimes men can be their own worst critic, and they can put themselves down in any little faults or failure, or what they consider faults or failure. And they can be their own worst critic. But you want to think about yourself as your own best friend. In other words, be kind to yourself. You want to engage in prayer, meditation, or sometimes just doing some reflection on your life. Like, how did I get as far as I did? And here are some online resources for men. And they're growing by the years as more men are now starting to speak out about mental health. Um, there are more online resources for men. Omega Psi Phi fraternity has a great program called Brother, You're on My Mind, which is really good. November encourage men to grow their mustaches in November, and so they do a lot of education and services to support men's mental health. That's a very good program as well. Mental Health America has a lot of screening tools that are good. Here's some mental health support groups for men. And some of them are online, and some of them you can find in person. Psychology Today is a really good search tool to help you find therapists in the local area. You can filter it by your insurance or even by your issue. And so you can actually get a lot of information from mental health professionals, psychiatrists, and like they said, in-person support group. And they have different support groups for different groups of men. Mental health therapy for men. These are a list of, you can connect with different therapists. So these are another search filters for therapists that will help you find a therapist in your area. And then mental health crisis resources. And I forgot to put the one for the vets. The VA also has a crisis support. Now, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is getting ready to change next month. It's going to change to 988. But for right now, it's 1-800-273-TALK or 8255. It's 24/7. If you don't want to talk to somebody, you can text them. So you can text home to 741-741, and you can connect with the crisis counselor 24/7. The SAMHSA also has a national helpline, 1-800-622-HELP or 4357. And then they have a National Alliance on Mental Illness has a free download guide and how to navigate through a mental health crisis. And with that, I'll leave it open for any questions. I was going to say, I don't see any questions. And Ray, I don't know if you see any.
I was muted.
I
didn't see any question. Let me take this opportunity and say thank you. What an amazing presentation. I was just talking with Pastor Cotton. We were both commenting on how relevant tonight's event is. I think, Dr. Wilson, oftentimes as men, we are taught to not acknowledge our feelings.
Mm-hmm.
We're kind of taught that if we're open and if we're honest, there's something wrong. And I think I want to thank you for breaking this down tonight and then giving us some real life examples of individuals who we've seen and who we know of and who we, in some cases, have followed or we consider ourselves fans or respect. And to see that, hey, this is that dealing with mental, having great mental health. Let me say that. It's something that fits the bill for everyone. I think oftentimes, as men, we are taught that we have to be Superman. And I thank you for nights like tonight that reminds us it's okay to be Clark Kent.
Absolutely. I like how you put that. So, yes, absolutely. And I will be, I'm proud to say that I am seeing more men seeking out counseling. And so my caseload with men, and this is real life, and some of them did have some of those quotes, like, I don't know if this is going to work, and I said, well, just give it a try. You never know, and so, but I am happy to see more men of all ages starting to seek out counseling.
So I agree with you. Let me say this, man, as a man, as a person who talks to a therapist, my life has been the better because I've been able to connect with someone who was able to help me see things I couldn't see. And I think you make a great point that as Christians, it's okay to watch this have Christ and the couch. It's Absolutely. Not a either or, it's a both and.
Absolutely.
I would say, I come that you might have life and have life more abundantly. You Absolutely. Can't have an abundant life. Please don't ever mistake that as finances. I come that you might have Zoe, life, fullness of life, and you can't have that without being the best you. So thank you, Dr. Wilson, again so much for your time. What an amazing conversation tonight. As always, this will be on our social media platforms. We're going to send this out to the men of our church in a text blast because this is something we want to make sure, men, that you get and not just hear, but to be able to take notes like I did and be able to digest it. And here's the truth, Dr. Wilson, to go through those some of the moments you said that I had to say ouch because I didn't want to really admit. But the truth is that it was good for me to hear. And so thank you so much. Listen, everybody, you have an amazing evening. We can't wait to see you next month for Let's Talk. We're so excited because we have the amazing Owen Wilson who's with us, who's given up her time to make sure that we all are the better. Listen, you have no excuse. You have no excuse not to live your best life. Why? Because you have the Word of God and now the woman of God who comes to us as well to help us on both ends. So your spirit life should be great. And if you're watching Let's Talk, your mental life should be great too. Take care, people. We'll see you next month. Have a great one.